Washington Journal continues.
This is Jessica Anderson. She is the Executive Director for Heritage Action for America, here to talk about the role that she and her group will play in this fall's election. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
A little bit about your group. I think we're familiar with the Heritage Foundation. Are you associated with that?
Yes, we are. We are the grassroots arm of the Heritage Foundation.
Oh, okay. And so is it independent from the foundation? And if so, how are you funded?
Yes, we are independent and independently funded from the foundation. We're a C4, so we can do more political advocacy work as well as grassroots work in the field across the country. And we're funded by a myriad of small dollar donors from coast to coast that want to see conservative values and principles advocated for here in Washington.
I imagine part of that advocacy that will be the fall elections. Particularly, what specifically do you envision your group playing?
Well, Heritage Action is committed to advancing conservative policies on the ground. And so we have been active since April 1st of this year in some battleground states, including North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa, talking directly with swing voters about the issues we know they care about. How to reopen the economy, how to secure the border, what economic opportunity and recovery looks like, education, skills training, job and wage satisfaction. All of that is front of mind in these swing voters as they make their decisions for November. So we've talked to just nearly 3 million across this country, and we've told them, if you want to advocate and advance conservative policy here in Washington, you have to vote your values, and you have to remember that when you go into the voting booth. So
I'm sorry, go ahead and finish.
Well, we've just been focused on that since April 1st, and I think so far we've seen just a hunger from the American people to talk about the issues at stake and to get past some of the personalities.
When you say swing voter, then specifically what do you mean, and how did you determine that?
We spent all of 2019 actually doing pretty robust polling across the country in both swing battleground states as well as at the local, congressional level. And so we measure a swing voter based on their voting history, their propensity or likelihood to vote in the upcoming election, and then specifically how they rate and value different policy issues. And so all of that then makes up a big data model that identifies where we should go and who we should talk to across the country.
In these conversations that you're having, what responses are you getting about the two gentlemen in question as far as this contest is concerned?
Well, it's really interesting because swing voters are very smart and they're in tune to the personalities, but they also recognize that policy drives the day. And so many swing voters may not like President Trump, but they don't trust President Biden. And that is coming out very clearly, especially when you look at the issue of safety and security. 4 out of 5 swing voters support the police, support law enforcement, and want to see safety and security return to our streets. And so when we have a conversation about this at their door, we really realize that this is top of mind for these swing voters. Yes, it's economic recovery post-COVID, but it's also the safety and security issue that they're very concerned with.
If you hear that response, then what response for those that are involved in this project of yours gives when it comes to security issues that you described, not only of that of President Trump, but of Joe Biden?
Well, we want to look specifically at ways to uphold law and order at the local level. And so one of the ways that we then pivot when we're talking to these swing voters about is, has your elected official committed to supporting law enforcement? Have they made a commitment to uphold the rule of law and order in our communities? And we measure that when we look at those elected officials at the local, state, and federal level that have signed Heritage Action's police pledge. This police pledge is a very simple pledge. It says that law enforcement have a righteous job in this country, and for them to do their job, they need to be allowed to provide safety and security at the most local level. And so we have everything from state and local officials that have signed this pledge to members of the House, just over a dozen senators. And since we opened this pledge about a week ago for citizens, for Americans to sign, we have nearly 70,000 citizens that have made this same commitment of seeking law and order, safety and security, and really pushing back against a lot of the chaos and anarchy that we are seeing.
How would you characterize then both President Trump and Joe Biden when it comes to those security issues? How would you characterize their policies, or at least the approach they take?
Well, the concern I have with Mr. Biden is that he has been very clear that he is comfortable with reimagining or retooling the police. I think that is a very concerning policy position to take. Obviously, his running mate has gone even further in her comments. And while we saw some of Biden's backtracking this last week of saying, actually, I might support the police or I could be comfortable with them, we know that he is going to be beholden to the furthest left-leaning and liberal wing of his party. And you look at AOC and you look at her full-throated endorsement of the defund the police movement, that's concerning. And it should concern swing voters because it really wrecks the community level that we have for safety and security and the reliance that we have on law enforcement to keep us safe. And you contrast that with President Trump, who has offered the National Guard to go into states to quell the violence. He's providing resources. He's providing extensive policy work and financial resources through DHS to get into states to restore that law and order, working with those governors that will have him. And so you have a very clear contrast between someone that is a robust support of law enforcement versus someone that is open to the conversation of reimagining or retooling the police, and that is concerning to me.
We've seen Joe Biden's campaign say that part of their efforts would be $300 million for community policing efforts and the like, even though you may not support the person. Is that something that you can sign on to, at least as far as the money and the effort?
Well, I think the bigger question is, can swing voters sign on to that? Most swing voters that we are talking to are not interested in a welfare service provider or community activist answering the phone when they dial 911. They want to know when they dial 911 that a law enforcement officer in blue uniform is going to arrive to take care of their family and assess any threat or danger in their household. And so, you know, those sorts of statements that I think we'll see in the next 50 days from both President Trump and Mr. Biden are going to reflect what is their plan for law enforcement, what is their plan to quell the violence and restore law and order. And anything short of supporting the police in the way that those that have signed our police pledge have done, I think is going to be concerning and fall short to these swing voters.
Jessica Anderson, our guest, she's the executive director of Heritage Action for America. If you want to ask her questions about the topics that we're engaging in, 202-748-8000. If you support Joe Biden, 202-748-8001. If you support President Trump, and if you're undecided or maybe you support others, you can call us at 202-748-8002. Ms. Anderson, it was just last week, when Joe Biden was in Pittsburgh. He talked about these issues of violence and brought these matters particularly back to the attention of President Trump. I want to play a portion of what he said, and then we'll get your response to it.
The simple truth is, Donald Trump failed to protect America. So now he's trying to scare America. Since Donald Trump and Mike Pence can't run on the record that has seen more American deaths to this virus, than the nation suffered in every war since Korea combined. Since they can't run on their economy that has seen more people lose their jobs than any time since the Great Depression. Since they can't run on the simple proposition of sending our children safely back to school. Since they have no agenda or vision for a second term, Trump and Pence are running on this, and I find it fascinating. Quote, "You won't be safe in Joe Biden's America." And what's their proof? The violence we're seeing in Donald Trump's America. These are not images of some imagined Joe Biden America in the future. These are images of Donald Trump's America today. He keeps telling you, if only he was president, it wouldn't happen. If he was president, he keeps telling us that he was president, you'd feel safe. Well, he is president, whether he knows it or not. And it is happening. It's getting worse. And you know why? Because Donald Trump adds fuel to every fire. Because he refuses to even acknowledge that there's a racial justice problem in America. Because he won't stand up to any form of violence. He's got no problem with right-wing militia, white supremacists, and vigilantes with assault weapons, often better armed than the police, often in the middle of the violence at the protesters and aiming it there. And because tens of millions of Americans simply don't trust this president to respect their rights, to hear their concerns, or to protect them. It doesn't have to be this way.
It was lengthy, Ms. Anderson, but as far as the characterizations go, what would be your response?
Well, there's a number of statements within Mr. Biden's comments that are fundamentally false. I mean, I think first you look at the cities that are overcome with the anarchy and chaos right now. You look at Portland, Seattle, Chicago. You even look at cities like Austin that are taking measures to defund the police. And you know that those are cities that are run by Democrats. And that is you can't argue with the facts of their partisan makeup. And the reality is that you have Democrat-controlled cities and Democrat-controlled states that are allowing the anarchy, allowing the chaos, the lawlessness to go so far past a peaceful protest that it's laughable. And it really shows just the hypocrisy of the moment. I mean, you have on one hand governors that are saying, let's keep these states locked down. Let's not allow children to return to schools. They need to be virtually schooling. And then on the split screen, you have 1,000-person violent protests and riots and fires and looting going on night after night. And you just see the hypocrisy play out. And so for Mr. Biden to blame that on President Trump, I think is a mistake. He really should be turning to his Democrat colleagues and encouraging them to step in to allow law enforcement to do their job and to fight back and quell this violence. So I think that's one. On the coronavirus comments, though, that Mr. Biden is making, I think it's very interesting the different tones that the fight for both our health and economic security around COVID-19 has taken really since the beginning of the year. You know, at the beginning, we were overreacting because we were shutting down travel. Now Republicans aren't doing enough. But when you look at something like when Washington came together with the CARES Act, that passed the Senate with 96 votes. Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz both voted for it. It was a bipartisan feat. It got relief out to states quickly. And while many of us on the conservative side of things do not like the increase in federal spending, what you saw was Washington coming together. That sort of coming together is not going to exist within 50 days of the election. It just isn't. And Democrats continuing to play partisan politics with the livelihoods and the health stability of Americans across the country is incredibly concerning. So when we talk to these swing voters, they know that President Trump can usher in economic recovery because he's done it before. And they want to see that happen. They want to allow and see the economy to reopen and flourish. We know that's the only way to bring us back, and we know it's the only way in the future. So I think Mr. Biden would be wise to speak to some of his Democrat colleagues, first on the violence, but then in getting serious about what sort of economic recovery this country actually needs.
We have phone calls lined up for you. Our first one is from Stephanie. She's in Brooklyn, a supporter of Joe Biden. You're on with Jessica Anderson of Heritage Action for America. Stephanie, go ahead.
Hi, yes, good morning. I'm calling because I have concerns. We are being run by a man that doesn't care for nobody, only for himself. What's happening with this virus is that it's affecting people in minority community. When Trump find out during the data who it was affecting the most, that's when he stepped back and said, I don't care, because it's not affecting my folks. It's affecting our minority community. So he wants this virus to go on so it can kill African Americans, Hispanics. That would be less votes for him.
Okay, we'll let our guest respond to that.
Thank you, Stephanie, for your call. So this president, I think, has a very solid record in support for the African American and minority communities, especially as we saw pre-COVID with the unemployment rates for African Americans being the lowest in America's recent history. So I think that's one. To call the president a racist is a mistake. He has fundamental support for everyone, women, minorities, irregardless. I worked in his administration. I saw this firsthand, and he is working diligently each and every day to ensure that we have the required health precautions that include things like social distancing and doing your part, wearing a mask, etc. But then also that we have the ability to have economic recovery. The people that have been most impacted from the looting, from the anarchy and the lawlessness in cities many are of the African American community, and that's exactly what the president wants to stop. He wants to allow those businesses to reopen, and he wants to allow all of us to thrive in an environment that we can have true economic recovery and opportunity.
From New York, This is Jim, a supporter of President Trump. You're on. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello?
You're on. Go ahead.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. She talked about President Trump securing the border. I'd like to know, he's a pretty tough guy. He talks about what's on his mind, and I'm going to vote for him again. But I haven't seen any change here in Central Islip and Brentwood. These houses are packed like sardines with people from Central and South America. I'm not making this up. I'm not prejudiced. I'm not racist. I'm just telling you what's going on. The coronavirus here is very high because these houses are packed. And I don't know why he doesn't do something like Eisenhower did in 1950. Of course, it's not feasible, but he could at least try.
Okay, Jim. Immigration issues overall, how did that chart with people that you were talking to, and what would be the response as far as President Trump's efforts on immigration?
Well, immigration reform is something that swing voters and conservatives, for that fact, care a lot about. And they really put it in two different buckets. What are the reforms that are needed for legal immigration? And then what are the strengthening that we need to thwart the illegal immigration that's still occurring across our southern border? And so when you put these in two buckets and you separate that they're actually two different issues, the lights begin to go on in swing voters' minds to understand, yes, we want to have an immigration process that is fair, that allows those that are wanting to come into this country legally to be able to come here to either join their families or seek a better life, but we want it to be done legally. And so conservatives have long advocated for legal immigration, and President Trump in particular has said he has wanted this country to be a country of legal immigrants. And so when you look at that issue and you contrast it, though, to any efforts that the left has and advocates for opening the borders or allowing illegal immigration to run unchecked, that's really where many conservatives and some swing voters split, and they instead want to push back and see even more efforts to secure the border, to allow more judges at the border, more border patrol, and to have a safe and secure border. And so the reforms that are needed for illegal immigration and securing the border, I think the president has done a good job continuing to build out new miles of the wall. We saw him unveil another 300 miles over the summer. That is work that no other president has been able to get done, but it's work that's even below the wall when you look at the enforcement procedures, you look at the asylum judges, you look at the actual troops and DHS facilities that are on the ground, and you have better communication and coordination between the federal officers and the state officers that are at the border. So I think first and foremost to the caller, it's important to separate the issues of legal versus illegal immigration, to look at them with clear eyes and to understand that we are a nation of immigrants, and we are a nation that flourishes on it, but we are a nation first and foremost with law and order. And you can't have true legal immigration unless you enforce the laws and you allow people to come here legally.
From Belcher, Kentucky, Tommy, a supporter of Joe Biden.
Yes, I have two questions. The first one is, who do we call when we get the need to protect ourselves from the Russians? Because anyone can tell how good he likes Mr. Putin. And the second is, how come they can receive money for all the corporations to bail out anytime they need it? Auto factories, airlines, everything like that. But when it comes to the poor people, we're at the bottom of the rung of getting anything. Thank you.
Thank you for that call. So I think the conversation around economic opportunity is the right one. And what we've seen both from conservative policy leaders and much of President Trump is that we want to provide opportunity for all without having favoritism to a select few or those that have special interests that they advocate for here in Washington. And that's really what the work that I do at Heritage Action is so focused on, which is advancing conservative policies in spite of the business as usual or any sort of, Washington swamp or Washington establishment that can take hold of the policy process. So when we advocate for bills like tax reform and allowing people to keep more of their money in their pocket, or advocating for deregulation, where you have less red tape if you're trying to open a business, if you're trying to lay broadband in your community, if you're trying to open a school. Any sort of deregulatory efforts, I think, should be championed by the Trump administration because they allow us to step further into economic opportunity for all Americans. And so when you look at the issues that are around the economy, one of the other things that our conversations with swing voters have shown is that they have a high degree of wage satisfaction. And so if you mirror that with everything that's gone on with COVID and what the last few months have shown of businesses having to shutter, small businesses have had to close, restaurants are closing, airlines are laying off and furloughing people, you see that there's real anxiety in voters in wanting to open up society, not with more handouts, but actually allowing their businesses to open. And so, the work that President Trump is doing to push governors to allow us to open up in smart and safe ways is the right push to be making. But furthermore than any of that, I think we all realize that for this country to move forward, we have to have the opportunity to flourish. And we can't do that with high regulations. We can't do that with high taxes. And we certainly can't do that if we continue to have our businesses and our schools closed.
Jessica Anderson from Heritage Action for America. Our guest, Joe in Pennsylvania, a supporter of President Trump. You're next up. Hello.
Hello. Good morning, Pedro.
You're on. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, sir. Jessica, I'd just like to congratulate you or pat you on the back for maintaining your composure after listening to that sharp-tongued woman that talked there a minute ago about President Trump wanting to kill black people. The reason why that virus is affecting minorities more so than white people all has to do with your body and vitamin E and its ability, your body's ability to ingest vitamin E from sunlight. That's the bottom line of that stuff. This racism crap got to stop. I wish them people would look at the big picture instead of getting their information from the rat hole. Jessica, you go, girl. Thank you, Pedro, for your time. Go Trump.
Well, I think the big picture on all of this is that we do want to have a healthy economy, and we want to actually have our economy opened up. And so regardless of anything that's been said today, I think that really is the focus, and it's certainly the focus on my mind as we head into the fall.
So you talked about the role of the police and security at the beginning. We've seen George Floyd's shooting, several other shootings. What's the role that has to play as far as the shooting of some of these African Americans and police practices overall? Is this an issue that should be taken up?
Well, I think that the House and Senate have taken up policing reforms, but it's really more of a local issue. And I think it's important to separate exactly and to know exactly what's going on in our streets. The anarchy and the lawlessness that we're seeing is so far beyond what was peaceful protests at the beginning of the summer. We have left that in our rearview mirror. What you're seeing right now is just complete anarchy that's being organized by those on the left that are trying to dismantle our American values, dismantle our American institutions, and in particular, they're trying to blame the police, blame law enforcement for the violence. For people like me that rely on law enforcement to keep our communities, to keep my family safe and secure, it's mind-boggling that the script has just been entirely flipped against the police. And the conversation that can be had of sensible police reforms at the local level should take place, but at the local level. It should be specific to the cities and the counties where they know their people best. They know any needs or trainings that need to be had. But the conversation and the rhetoric that is going on right now from the left is what is inspiring and allowing this lawlessness to continue. And that should concern everyone. It certainly concerns those swing voters we talked to. As I said earlier, 4 out of 5 support law enforcement. They do not want to see the police defunded, and they want to see our law enforcement be allowed to secure our streets and to provide safety and security in a really meaningful way.
Which states specifically are you targeting?
So we are active in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Iowa, and Wisconsin with on-the-ground canvassing or phone banking efforts. We also have a footprint in Florida, in Georgia, in South Carolina, in Arizona, in California, Utah, and a few other states. So we think of activism in 2 prongs. One, where are those swing voters that we can talk to about the issues? We can bring them in to the conservative movement for the long term, with the hopes that they share our vision for American values, they share our visions for American institutions, for a strong economy, for a sound economy, et cetera. And then where do we have grassroots activists? Everywhere. You know, we have activists even in Nancy Pelosi's district, even in AOC's district, because we believe that conservatives are present in all parts of this country. They want to do more. They want to hold their member of Congress accountable. And in many ways, they're waiting for that congressman or congresswoman to step aside, and then we can run someone new in that area. So we call those our sentinels. They really are on the front lines of this fight for freedom, and we have 20,000 of them all across the country.
And apologies, I should have clarified in my last statement, George Floyd was not a shooting. That was another, but there were other shootings, so I just wanted to clarify that. Joe in Maine, a supporter of Joe Biden. Hello.
Yes, hi, Jessica and Pedro. Good morning.
Good morning.
I got to ask you, Jessica, what is your definition of a lie? You just called Joe Biden a liar on his plan. You know, there's a health care. Donald Trump said 2 months ago he's going to put health care on the table right now before the election. Don't you think that's a lie? There's no health care. The guy has lied 20,000 times. You say that Biden is a liar? What's your answer to that, dear? And what are you getting paid to be here? You're a lobbyist. You're no expert on economy. You're no expert on COVID. You are a mouthpiece.
Okay, Joe, we'll leave it there. She's our guest that we've invited. Ms. Anderson, go ahead.
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to look specifically at the issues that Americans care about. And that's what my organization seeks to do. We want to talk about the issues that come up around our family kitchen tables. What is going to happen with our health care? Well, on the health care reform in particular, I think you've seen President Trump do a number of big moves that we would have liked to have seen even bigger, of course. We support allowing states to have health care plans that are closest to the people, where you have more choice, greater access, that you have a close-knit relationship with your doctor so that you can come up with a healthcare plan that makes sense for you and for your family. And so the work that President Trump has done to allow health insurance to be decoupled from Obamacare and to allow it to be at the most local level is important. And it's one that allows more access and greater patient control. So that's one. I think second of all, what you've seen with Mr. Biden on the campaign trail is a lot of tiptoeing around this issue of safety and security. Yes, he talks a big talk, but the reality is he has said both things. He has said that he is willing and open to reimagine or rethink, retool the police force. That should concern every single one of us that wants to see safety and security in our neighborhoods. And so when he says that, that's more than just rhetoric. It's trickling out and actually beginning to be in the bloodstream of policymakers at the local level. You have a city like Austin, Texas, Little Rock, Arkansas, even Dallas that are considering proposals that would gut police departments. That should concern all of us when we think about the role of law and order and keeping our families safe.
Joe Biden has directly said in the past about defunding the police that he's against that kind of proposal.
He has said that, and he's also said that he's open to reimagining and retooling. And I think that is exactly what goes back to these swing voters' sentiment that they can't trust him. Swing voters may not like President Trump, but they can't trust President Biden because he changes his mind on these issues. Or worse, we know that he will be beholden to the furthest left wing of his party. And that really begins to shock all of us, because the moderate of Joe Biden that was 20, 30 years ago when he was starting in the Senate and first running is not the Joe Biden that you see today. It really isn't. And the separation of the two is important. And I think swing voters recognize that. They realize that a lot of policies such as safety and security and economic opportunity are at stake this November. They're going to vote accordingly, and we want to encourage that they vote for their values and really in support of the American values and institutions that we all have come to love and to cherish.
Here is an undecided voter from Daytona Beach, Florida. We're talking to John. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First, let me say that I've been a registered independent voter for like almost the last 20 years, and I neither support either party. But I do have a three-part question that I'd like to ask, that I'd like to see how the current president would answer, to make me vote for him to give him a second term. The first one is, in June, I actually was watching the TV news show, and I saw where the president said that the virus will go away. But since then, the only thing that has gone away is another 50,000 lives on top of the 120,000 that had already passed when he said that. And then the second one was, I keep watching the shows and the commercials, the political ads, and I keep hearing the president say, or those that support the president say, that under Joe Biden, cities will burn, streets will be filled with blood. All the things that are happening now under his watch, he's saying that it's almost like he's saying that it's not happening now. It's not going to happen until Joe Biden is elected, if he's elected. So that's the second part. And then the third one is that, I'm reading about cities and states who have tight budgets, who are on the verge of cutting services, and the police department may be included. So in a way, that's kind of like defunding the police if this current administration don't give support to cities and states as they need it.
Okay, we'll put those out there for our guests to respond to.
Great, thank you. So I think first we need to look at where we see the violence in these cities, and we see them being run by Democrats. And you see in many cases, in particular the mayor of Portland, flat out refusing in multiple letters any help from the federal government. He's refused help from the president. He's refused resources and finances going into his cities to quell the violence that is going on night after night after night. And so when you see something like that, how can you not believe that this would be allowed to continue to be run unchecked if Democrats were to take over in the Oval Office? And so I think when President Trump is talking about the lawlessness that is just running amok, he's speaking specifically to those Democrat-run cities that are not sending in their police forces and they are refusing federal resources. So I think that's one. On economic recovery, as well as the health security around the issue of COVID-19 or the coronavirus, what we see right now, where you've got both a fractured rollout of schools. My children went back to school this week. They're part digital learning, part in person. 7-year-olds are wearing masks. 5-year-olds are concerned about catching the coronavirus. Our schools really aren't allowed to reopen, although the testing continues to show that children are least susceptible to the virus. And so you have this play that's going on where you've got Democrat states or Democrat-run cities that are allowing schools to stay closed instead of reopening them. And that is concerning, I think, not only to swing voters, but of course it's concerning to conservatives everywhere. And so one of the things we've been advocating for is to allow schools to open, but to allow them to open in a safe and smart way that allows the teachers to be safe, it allows the students to be safe, and you can do that by prioritizing testing. You can do that by making sure that any schools that are in hotspots are the ones that move to virtual. We don't need this one-size-fits-all coronavirus response where we know that different parts of the country are affected by the virus in different ways. So when you look at the role that, for instance, the coronavirus task force led by Vice President Pence has been taking, you see that it has a very targeted, a very measured approach to get relief where it's needed the most on the health side. Now, on the economic side of the issue, when we talk specifically with the swing voters we're chatting with, they actually respond that the economic issue is more important than their health. They're watching their small business be closed. They know that retail's not opening, restaurants aren't opening, or they're opening very slowly. And the only way that we can have a shot as a country for economic recovery and to bring back the best unemployment rates and the strongest economy that we've seen in decades is to allow businesses to reopen. And so the policies that are needed to put that in place can't just be these Band-Aids of sending more unemployment dollars back to the ground. We actually have to allow businesses to open. Maybe they open a few days a week, again, taking into consideration where the hotspots are, taking into consideration testing and any measures that need to be taken, of course, to keep people safe. We want to take the virus serious, but there are ways to go about this that don't play partisan politics like we're seeing right now from some of these Democrat governors.
This is from Maryland, a supporter of President Trump. Dennis, go ahead.
Hi, how you both doing this morning?
Hi, Dennis.
Good. I just have a couple brief comments. And knowing I was just wondering, one of your previous callers was talking about giving money out to different countries and, having to have stimulus and everything. I can remember, I'm pretty sure, Mr. Pedro, you can remember back when Obama first came into office, he had to bail out Wall Street, and they did bail out Wall Street. They bailed out the richest people in this country. And I can remember it was like $787 billion went to the auto industry, big Wall Street firms and all, and the American people sat here and just let it happen. And it is our fault because we allow it to happen, because we don't vote the right way no more. We need to vote. People want to vote party lines. Here's why I voted for Trump. A lot of people don't understand why Trump got voted in. The Republican voter was so PO'd at the Republican Party. That's how Donald Trump got in. And that's the truth. That's the truth. He got in because he was something different. We wanted something different other than people that have been there 30, 40, 50 years. And I don't know if anybody agrees with me, but we definitely got to have term limits. You can't allow people to make a career out of being a political politicians.
Okay, thanks, Dennis.
I don't think anyone would argue that Donald Trump really came to disrupt Washington, right? His entire slogan was to drain the swamp. And that sort of visualization was, I think, very much on display the week of the Republican National Convention, where you had just these incredible vignettes, incredible stories from average Americans across the country, whether you had the immigrant Alvarez talking about his story of coming to America legally, or you had the two women that were small business owners talking about the need to open up their business in spite of COVID and to usher in that economic recovery for their area. And that sort of visualization, I think, that was really on display the week of the RNC goes to the heart of what President Trump is about. He is about making America great. I mean, it's a slogan for a reason, and he's come to Washington. He's been here the last 3.5 years to do just that, and his record on both the economy, deregulatory efforts, his national security, his work on illegal immigration, his work on securing the border, being the most pro-life president, all of that shows that he's willing to come to the table and to make a deal. Now, one of the things that I think is worth mentioning, when the caller talked about state bailouts and the role that the federal government has had, the Senate is considering a bill this week on COVID recovery in particular. One of the things that is really good in the bill is that it does not bail out states. That is an important step, I think, for conservatives to make, in that we're not going in and bailing out those misguided states that have bloated budgets and things that are unrelated to the coronavirus. Now, the package is flawed in many other ways. It continues a misguided pattern of overspending by the federal government, and it certainly isn't targeted or temporary in the way that we as conservatives would like. But that one element of not bailing out states is worth celebrating, and it's worth acknowledging that the president realizes that federal spending has to get under control. And in particular, you can't just continue to have bailout after bailout after bailout. And so I think the caller's sentiments are the right ones, that many have elected President Trump to come here to do a job that others seemingly couldn't do, and to try to get the best deal, not for him, but for the American people.
Many of those states have attributed their current fiscal position, though, directly to COVID-related matters. Shouldn't they get assistance?
They already are. So the CARES Act provided that direct assistance for any states that have specific budget shortfalls because of the coronavirus. Let's not forget that the CARES Act provided a big lump sum to states to allocate directly for those needs. Any state bailouts at this point are actually further than that. They're going to the backlog of pension bailouts. They're going to mismanaged budgets. I mean, you look at a state like Illinois or New York that has decades long of mismanagement at the state level of their finances, and they're trying to use the crisis of COVID-19 to take advantage of the federal tax dollar and the federal taxpayer, and that's a mistake, and it's something that all conservatives should oppose.
Edward is in Florida, supporter of Joe Biden. Go ahead, you're on.
Good morning, Jessica and Pedro. Thank you for C-SPAN. We're talking about law and order president and Donald Trump. This is a law and order president who has more people indicted and convicted in his administration than several other administrations combined, but he's a law and order president. We talk about law and order in the cities that are having issues with rioters. That is true. You will point out Antifa, you will point out Black Lives Matter members But talk about this. How come you never, ever hear from the Republicans about the Proud Boys and the white supremacists who are mixing it up and going into cities, also causing issues? Both sides are wrong. Anybody's wrong who does that. Looting and rioting is not right. Then you talk about reform or defunding the police at the local level. That's part of the problem. Local police forces have not addressed the issues of communities and minority communities in the right way. So I don't understand how you don't see, whereas the federal government, in many cases, not all, has to step in and try to make some reforms. You guys are wrapping yourselves in the flag, and if you're not a Republican, if you're not a conservative, you're un-American if you speak out against the ills of this nation.
Edward, thank you. We'll let our guest respond.
Anarchy from any side of the aisle is exactly what should concern all voters. And I think the reaction that swing voters have to this particular flavor of anarchy that's going on in this country is that they are concerned of the chaos. They're concerned that the violence hasn't been quelled. They're concerned that they don't have a freedom of safety if they walk out in their streets, or if they try to go to their business, to their schools, to wherever about their daily lives. And so the violence that is just far more than just looting or bashing windows. I mean, you saw in Kenosha just 2 weeks ago, whole car lots of cars were being lit on fire. I mean, it looked like fireworks. And so that sort of anarchy, that sort of lawlessness is exactly what swing voters are concerned with. It's what we at Heritage Action are concerned with. And we think the best way that you can push back against that is to actually support law enforcement, allow them to do their job, and to go in there and to quell the violence and restore the law and order where it's needed. So I think first and foremost, we have to recognize that what this country is facing is not happening in a vacuum, and it's very specific anarchy that has a goal in mind, which is to upend American institutions, to upend American values, and all of that is on the line. It's certainly front and center when we think of the stakes for this November, and I think swing voters are going to vote based on the value system that they want to see propelled further for the next 4 years when they get into that voting booth come November 3rd.
Illinois, this is Rose, a supporter of President Trump.
Hi, good morning. I have so many issues I could talk about, every single one that the people brought up, but I want to bring up something that's very current. They just accused the president of being anti-military. And I want you guys to remember that when Obama was president, he didn't allow the military to shoot first. He made our soldiers living, walking targets of the enemies. In all of history of the world, no leader or no general or no, person that runs the armies would ever allow their soldiers just to stand still and be a target of the people, of the enemies. So during Bush's time, he used to put all the tallies of the deaths of the soldiers at the bottom of the screen. When Obama became president and our soldiers increased prolifically of deaths, the tallies on the bottom of the screen were taken off because he didn't want the American people to know his objective is to wipe out our own army.
Okay, caller, we'll leave it there.
Well, as a wife of an Army veteran myself, I can tell you that supporting the troops and supporting those that volunteer to go out of their way to protect America abroad is one of the most noblest professions. It is not without sacrifice, and it's not without putting country first, and many times putting country before family or professional aspirations. And so I think all of us as Americans can unite and be proud of our country and to be proud of our troops abroad, to support our soldiers when they're in harm's way, whether that's defending us from foreign enemies abroad or doing the hard work that the National Guard does here in the United States. And so I think President Trump has been very clear in his support for the troops. He's been very clear in his support for Americans, veterans as well. And he's done that both by every call that he's made to a fallen soldier, to passing bills and signing bills, that have been passed from Congress that support veterans. So I think we should look at his record before we look at any misguided leak that has a clear partisan aim to distract from the policies of today.
One of those comments in recent days, it was made in that Atlantic story, but other places as well, about disparaging comments about John McCain. How would you square that?
Well, I think you have to look past all of the rhetoric, and that really is exactly what swing voters are trying to do. They're trying to look past the personalities that are at play with both Mr. Biden's forgetfulness and his lack of energy, and then anything that that President Trump might be saying that swing voters may not like. And they're trying to make decisions that are based on the policies. Who's going to provide the best opportunity for the economy? Who gets us out of these endless wars? Who provides smart federal spending solutions? Who secures the border? Those are the questions that are front of mind of these swing voters. And as of the last 6 weeks, safety and security is right up there with the rest.
Jessica Anderson with Heritage Action for America. If you want to go to the website and check out their work, it's heritageaction.com. We thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You heard our guest reference this current debate going on Capitol Hill about another coronavirus spending package, a proposal from the Senate of $500 billion. We want to get your thoughts overall on this idea of Congress approving more coronavirus spending. Here's how you can let us know in the last half hour. 202-748-8000 for those of you who are unemployed. 202-748-8001 if you are a small business owner or employee. And 202-748-8002 for all others. We'll have that conversation and take your calls when Washington Journal continues.